May 16th, 1291. Just after midnight, 20 feet beneath King Henry's tower, in darkness so complete it feels solid, Syrian sappers complete 8 days of work. Oil-soaked timber supports, thick beams holding up tons of stone and earth, catch fire with a hungry whoosh. The men retreat through the tunnel, smoke chasing them, heat at their backs. Above, a Crusader sentinel feels the ground tremble. Dust rises between stones at his feet. The tower groans, a sound from the earth itself. Then, with a roar that echoes across the sleeping city, 60 feet of fortification collapses into the moat in an avalanche of screaming stone. From the Mamluk camp, 45,000 warriors erupt in celebration. The starving defenders, who fought so bravely for so long, watch their walls fall in a single night. But this ending began 2 years earlier, when the first warning arrived and no one wanted to believe. Dawn breaks over Tripoli on April 26, 1289. The city smolders. 4 weeks of siege have ended in collapse, and now survivors stream toward the harbor in desperate crowds. Smoke rises from buildings still burning. The smell of death hangs thick. Bodies in the streets, blood on the stones, the aftermath of Sultan Qalawun's methodical destruction. Brother Matthias moves through the chaos with a blood-stained letter clutched against his chest. He's 33 years old, a Templar messenger more comfortable with documents than swords. His hands shake. He's seen things in the past 4 weeks that will wake him gasping for years to come. The screaming when the walls fell, the indiscriminate slaughter that followed, children crying for parents who would never answer. He reaches the harbor where the last ships prepare to depart. Space is precious. People fight each other for room on overcrowded decks. A woman offers a merchant her jewelry, everything she owns, for passage for her children. He takes the jewelry and refuses the children anyway. The mathematics are brutal. Not everyone can be saved. Matthias boards a Templar galley, the letter still pressed to his chest. As the ship pulls away from the dock, he watches Tripoli recede. The city that stood for 180 years has fallen in a month. The implications sit heavy in his stomach. If Tripoli could fall so quickly, what about Acre? 3 days later, the ship arrives in Acre Harbor. Matthias disembarks on legs still uncertain from the voyage and makes his way through the crowded streets. Acre is alive with the noise of commerce, the mingled languages of Italian merchants and Syrian craftsmen, the calls to prayer from mosques and church bells from cathedrals. It's a cosmopolitan city where Christians and Muslims have lived in uneasy coexistence for decades. Walking these streets, it's almost possible to forget there's a war at all. Almost. Matthias climbs the worn stone steps to the Templar fortress in the southwestern corner of the city. Guards recognize his cloak and wave him through. Inside the compound, away from the marketplace noise, there's a different atmosphere. Knights practice sword forms in the courtyard with focused intensity. Armor is checked and rechecked. Supplies are inventoried. These men know something the merchants don't want to acknowledge. Guillaume de Beaujeu stands on the fortress wall, looking east toward the horizon. At nearly 60 years old, his face carries the accumulated scars of 4 decades in the Holy Land. Gray streaks his beard. His shoulders have the slight stoop of a man who's carried too much weight for too long. But his eyes remain sharp, taking in every detail of Acre's defenses with the practiced assessment of a master tactician. He hears Matthias's footsteps on the stone and turns. The younger man's face tells the story before he speaks. Guillaume has seen that expression before, the hollow eyes of someone who's witnessed a city die. Matthias extends the letter. His voice cracks slightly when he speaks. Tripoli has fallen, Grand Master. 4 weeks. That's all it took. Guillaume takes the letter but doesn't open it immediately. He already knows what it will say. The patterns have been clear for years to anyone willing to see them. Sultan Qalawun has been systematically dismantling what remains of the Crusader kingdoms, fortress by fortress, city by city. Tripoli was simply the latest. The only question was whether Acre would be next. He breaks the seal and reads. The letter is brief, written by the ranking Templar in Tripoli in the hours before evacuation. The words are clinical, reporting casualties and timelines with military precision. But between the lines, Guillaume reads the truth. The walls fell because they weren't reinforced. The defenders couldn't hold because they were too few. The city died because no one came to help. Guillaume looks back toward the eastern horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the visible distance, Calawun is planning his next move. And Acre, the last major Christian stronghold in the Holy Land, is the only prize remaining. He turns to Matthias. Gather the other commanders, the masters of the hospital and the Teutonic Order, the Italian consuls, the city bailiff. We meet at sunset. Matthias nods and hurries away, relieved to have delivered his burden. Guillaume remains on the wall, the letter still in his hand. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the city. From here, he can see the double walls that protect Acre's landward side, the 12 towers that have stood for generations, the harbor filled with merchant ships. It looks impregnable. It looked that way from inside Tripoli, too. That evening, in the chapter house of the Templar fortress, the city's leaders gather around a long table. The room is lit by oil lamps, their flames casting dancing shadows on stone walls. Jean de Villiers, Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller, arrives first. He's 55, stocky and scarred, with a practical demeanor that contrasts with Guillaume's spiritual intensity. Conrad von Feuchtwangen, head of the Teutonic Knights, follows shortly after. The Italian merchant consuls, representatives from Genoa, Pisa, and Venice, arrive together, their rich clothing at odds with the austere surroundings. Guillaume doesn't waste time on pleasantries. He spreads a map on the table showing the Levantine coast. Crusader territories, once stretching from Antioch to Egypt, have shrunk to a narrow strip of coastal cities. And now, even those are falling. Tripoli is gone, he begins, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years' experience. Calawun took it in 4 weeks. He will come for us next. One of the Italian consuls, a Genoese merchant named Pietro, waves his hand dismissively. The Sultan has treaties with us, trade agreements. He won't risk disrupting commerce. Guillaume looks at him with something approaching pity. He had treaties with Tripoli too. Treaties matter only until they don't. Calawun wants us gone, not regulated, not taxed, gone. Every Crusader fortress from here to Antioch has fallen or been abandoned. We're all that remains. Jean de Villiers leans forward, studying the map. His voice is measured, pragmatic. What do you propose? We can't fight the entire Mamluk Sultanate with the forces we have in Acre. No, Guillaume agrees. We can't fight them and win. But we can prepare, reinforce the walls, store grain and water, recall every knight from outlying positions, send urgent messages to Europe requesting reinforcements. If we prepare now, we might hold long enough for help to arrive. The younger knights around the table nod eagerly. They believe in divine providence, in the righteousness of their cause. Surely God will not allow the last Christian city to fall. Surely the Pope will call a new crusade. Surely England and France will send armies. Guillaume doesn't share their optimism, but he doesn't voice his doubts. These men need to believe resistance is possible, or they won't resist at all. And even if Acre is doomed, every day they hold is another day for refugees to escape, for records to be preserved, for the story to be told. The meeting continues into the night, discussing logistics and defense strategies. The Italians reluctantly agree to contribute to fortification costs, though they still believe their trade relationships will protect them. The military orders coordinate watch schedules and assign defensive sectors. Plans are made for storing supplies and evacuating civilians if the worst occurs. When the others finally depart, Guillaume remains alone in the chapter house. The oil lamps have burned low, casting the room in near darkness. He thinks about the letter from Tripoli, the clinical description of walls falling and people dying. He thinks about the pattern that's been unfolding for his entire career, the slow, inexorable retreat of Christian power from lands they never should have tried to hold in the first place. But he doesn't think about running. The Templar vow is absolute. Defend the Holy Land, protect pilgrims, stand until you fall. He took that oath 40 years ago as a young man burning with faith. He still believes it, even if the faith has become quieter, more complicated, textured with doubt. If Acre is where his story ends, so be it. He'll make the ending mean something. The months pass. Guillaume drives the preparations with relentless focus. Walls are inspected stone by stone, weak sections reinforced. Cisterns are filled. Grain is purchased and stored in fortress cellars. Knights drill daily, their sword forms precise and deadly. Messages are sent to Rome, to Paris, to London, begging for reinforcements. Some responses trickle back. The Pope expresses concern. The King of France sends his regrets but is dealing with troubles at home. The King of England promises to consider the matter. The promises are hollow, and Guillaume knows it. Europe has grown tired of sending men and gold to defend cities in the desert. The age of crusading fervor has passed. But Acre's preparations continue anyway, because preparation is all they have. In August of 1290, on a sweltering afternoon when the heat makes stone walls radiate like ovens, something breaks. A group of newly arrived Italian Crusaders, poorly trained, zealous, drunk on religious fervor and wine, riot through the Muslim quarter. What starts as harassment escalates into violence. Shops are looted, buildings are burned, and in the chaos people die. Among them is Yusuf, a 60-year-old spice merchant who's lived peacefully in Acre for 3 decades. His shop near the market square has been a fixture of the community, a place where Christians and Muslims met on neutral ground to trade and talk. He's raised his children here, seen his grandchildren born here. His murder is senseless, brutal, the destruction of a life spent building bridges. Guillaume hears the news and immediately understands the implications. He rushes to the scene with a detachment of Templars trying to restore order. But it's too late. The damage is done. Bodies lie in the streets. The Muslim survivors flee toward the harbor, desperate to board ships to Egypt or Syria, carrying stories of massacre. Guillaume orders the arrest of the ringleaders, but it's a hollow gesture. The Italian Crusaders claim they were defending Christianity from infidels. Some of the city's Christian population actually support them, seeing the riot as righteous purification rather than murder. The disconnect between Guillaume's pragmatic understanding and the zealots' fervor is total. He stands in Yusuf's ruined shop, looking at the blood-stained floor where an old man died trying to protect his family. The smell of smoke lingers. A ledger lies open on the counter, listing transactions in multiple languages, evidence of the cosmopolitan trade that made Acre wealthy. All of it rendered meaningless by violence. Jean de Villiers finds him there. The Hospitaler's face is grim. This will reach Cairo. I know, Guillaume says quietly. Calawun will use it as justification. The treaties are finished. Can we negotiate, offer reparations, punish the guilty? Guillaume shakes his head. It's too late for that. We just gave him the excuse he needed. The army will come. And it does. News arrives in October that Sultan Calawun has dissolved the 10-year truce with Acre. The Mamluk army is mobilizing. Fortresses across Egypt and Syria are sending siege engines to a central gathering point. Supplies are being stockpiled, troops are being assembled. The preparations are methodical, overwhelming, inexorable. Then, in November, unexpected news. Calawun dies outside Cairo while marching toward Acre. For a brief moment, there's hope. Perhaps his son will be more interested in consolidating power than continuing the campaign. Perhaps the army will disperse. Perhaps God has granted a reprieve, but the hope is short-lived. Al-Ashraf Khalil, Calawun's second son, assumes the throne immediately. And rather than abandoning his father's campaign, he embraces it. The army continues marching north. If anything, the pace increases. Khalil has spent his entire life in his father's shadow. Conquering Acre will be his proof of worthiness, his claim to legitimacy. Guillaume watches the city prepare for siege with a mixture of determination and sorrow. The civilians don't understand yet. They go about their daily business, merchants haggling in the markets, children playing in the streets, fishermen bringing in their catches. They believe the walls will protect them. They believe help will come. They believe God is on their side. Guillaume believes in God too, but he's learned that divine favor doesn't always manifest in earthly victory. Sometimes faith means standing when you know you'll fall. Sometimes courage is choosing how you lose rather than believing you'll win. The days shorten as winter approaches. Guillaume walks the walls each evening, memorizing the city he knows he'll lose. The angle of light on the harbor, The sound of evening prayers rising from churches and mosques, the smell of bread baking in the morning. He commits it all to memory, storing these details against the darkness he sees approaching. On a cold evening in March of 1291, standing on the tower of the legate with the Mediterranean wind in his face, Guillaume watches the eastern horizon. The sunset paints the sky in shades of orange and red, beautiful and terrible, like fire spreading across the world. Jean de Villiers joins him on the wall. For a long moment, neither man speaks. Finally, the Hospitaller breaks the silence. "Do you think anyone will come? From Europe?" Guillaume doesn't look away from the horizon. "No, we're alone." "Then why prepare? Why not evacuate while we still can?" "Because some people can't evacuate, and someone has to buy them time." He pauses, choosing his words carefully. "We won't save Acre, but we might save the people in it. Every hour we hold is another ship full of refugees reaching Cyprus. That's worth dying for." Jean considers this. "You're at peace with it then? With how this ends?" Guillaume finally turns to look at his fellow commander. There's no fear in his face, no resignation, just a calm acceptance that comes from 40 years of walking toward this moment. "I've been preparing my whole life to stand in the right place at the right time and hold the line. This is that place. This is that time. I'm ready." The wind picks up, carrying the scent of the sea. Somewhere to the east, beyond the darkness, an army is coming. An army larger than anything Acre has faced before, led by a sultan desperate to prove himself, equipped with siege engines that can break walls that have stood for generations. But tonight, the walls still stand. Tonight, the city still lives. Tonight, there's still time to prepare, to pray, to make peace with what's coming. Guillaume takes one last look at the horizon, then turns and walks back down the stone steps. There's work to be done. Preparations to finalize. Letters to write. The ending is approaching, but it hasn't arrived yet. And until it does, he'll stand. Because that's what he swore to do 40 years ago, and some oaths don't end until you do. April 5th, 1291. Dawn breaks with the color of old blood. The sentinels on Acre's eastern wall see it first, a darkness on the horizon that isn't the retreating night. Then, the darkness resolves into shapes, banners, hundreds of them snapping in the morning wind. The glint of armor catches the rising sun. And beneath it all, a sound like distant thunder, the steady drumbeat of an army on the march. Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil arrives before Acre with 45,000 warriors. The army spreads across the plain like a living organism, flowing around the city from coast to coast. Egyptian cavalry in gleaming armor, Syrian infantry with spears that forest the ground, engineers from Damascus with their tools and measuring chains, religious volunteers from across the Mamluk Sultanate, driven by the promise of paradise and the expulsion of foreign invaders. Guillaume stands on the tower of the legate, counting enemy contingents with the practiced eye of a man who's assessed battlefields for 4 decades. Beside him, younger Templars whisper prayers. Their voices carry an edge of panic they're trying to suppress. Brother Thomas, 25 years old and still believing God rewards righteousness with victory, grips the stone parapet until his knuckles whiten. One of the younger knights finally asks the question they're all thinking. "Grand Master, how many?" Guillaume doesn't look away from the assembling host. His voice is steady, matter of fact. "Too many. Far too many." The Mamluk camp establishes itself with military precision. Tents rise in organized rows. Supply wagons are positioned. Water sources are secured. And on a hill overlooking the city, a red tent appears, larger and richer than the others. Khalil's command post. From that vantage point, the Sultan can see the entire battlefield, can watch Acre's walls and plan their destruction. Then, the siege engines arrive. 15 giant trebuchets, each requiring dozens of men to operate, are rolled into position. The largest can hurl 100-pound stones. Smaller mangonels and catapults, dozens of them, are assembled with practiced efficiency. Muslim chroniclers will later write that more artillery concentrated under Acre's walls than had ever been assembled in one place. Standing on the walls, Watching this mechanical forest of destruction take shape, the defenders believe it. The message is clear. This will not be a long siege of starvation and attrition. This will be an overwhelming application of force, a systematic demolition of walls that have stood for generations. Guillaume immediately orders every able-bodied man to the walls. The city's population has swollen to perhaps 40,000 with refugees from fallen territories, but only about 15,000 can fight. Merchants are handed crossbows, pilgrims are given spears, servants learn to carry stones for the trebuchets. The mathematics are brutal. 3 Mamluk warriors for every defender. That night, as enemy campfires illuminate the plain like fallen stars, Guillaume sits in the Templar chapel. The space is small, intimate, lit by a single candle. He's removed his armor for the first time in days. His shoulders ache. His knees protest when he kneels. 60 years of life, 40 of warfare, have accumulated in his joints like rust. He doesn't pray for victory. He's too honest for that. Instead, he prays for strength, for wisdom, for the courage to stand when standing becomes impossible, for the grace to die well if dying is what's required. The prayer is simple, direct, the conversation of a man who's talked to God long enough to skip the formal language. Brother Thomas finds him there. The young Templar hovers in the doorway, uncertain whether to interrupt. Guillaume gestures him in without rising. The men ask for guidance, Grandmaster. What do we tell them? Guillaume considers the question. He could offer false hope, could promise that Europe will send reinforcements, could insist that God will grant them miraculous victory. But Thomas deserves the truth, and Guillaume is too tired for comforting lies. Tell them we will likely die here, but we will die as Templars, as knights, as men of faith. That's not defeat. That's choosing how our story ends. Thomas struggles with this. His face shows the war between training and instinct, between faith and fear. Is there no hope? No chance that we might hold? Miracles happen, Guillaume says, and his voice carries decades of complicated faith. But we plan for reality. Make your confession. Write letters to family if you have any. Prepare your soul. And when the end comes, stand. That's all we can do. That's all we've ever been able to do. The young knight nods slowly, processing this. He leaves quieter than he arrived, carrying the weight of truth. Guillaume returns to his prayer. The candle burns lower, wax pooling at its base. Outside, the sounds of the city shift from day to night, voices fading, shutters closing, the change of the guard on the walls. Somewhere in the Mamluk camp, Khalil is planning tomorrow's assault. Somewhere in the tunnels that will soon be dug, sappers are sharpening tools. The machinery of siege warfare is already turning, inexorable as weather. But for this moment, in this small chapel, there is only candlelight and prayer, and the quiet acceptance of a man who knows his fate and meets it without flinching. The bombardment begins on April 6th. The first stone arcs through the morning air with a sound like tearing fabric, growing louder as it approaches. It strikes the outer wall of the Tower of the Legate, exploding against stone in a shower of fragments. The boom echoes across the city. Before the echo fades, another stone is already in the air. Then another, then 10 more. The trebuchets establish a rhythm, a drumbeat of destruction that never stops. Day and night, the stones fall. They pulverize sections of wall, they crash through roofs, they kill indiscriminately. A woman drawing water from a well, a child playing in a courtyard, an old man who simply chose the wrong moment to cross the wrong street. The city fills with dust that never settles, a fine powder that coats everything, turns everyone into ghosts. The defenders fight back. Acres' own trebuchets return fire. Crossbowmen on the walls target Mamluk soldiers who venture too close. The killing is mutual, constant, exhausting, but the mathematics don't change. For every Mamluk who falls, 3 more take his place. For every defender killed, the remaining number shrinks, and there are no reinforcements coming. Food becomes scarce within the first week. The siege has cut off all land routes, and Mamluk ships captured from previous conquests now blockade the harbor. What grain remains in the city storerooms is rationed. A loaf of bread that cost a few copper coins before the siege now sells for silver. Then gold. Then it's not available at any price because there's simply nothing left to buy. People begin to look gaunt. Children cry from hunger their parents cannot satisfy. The elderly die quietly in corners, their bodies adding to a disposal problem the city wasn't designed to handle. Rats, once killed on sight, become a dietary option. Leather is boiled for whatever nutrition it might contain. The city slowly starves while watching the Mamluk camp, where supply wagons arrive daily from Egypt and Syria, where cooking fires burn with abundant fuel, where an army of 45,000 eats well. Disease follows hunger as surely as night follows day. Dysentery spreads through crowded quarters, typhus appears, wounds that should heal fester and putrefy. The city's physicians are overwhelmed, working until they collapse, watching people die from conditions that should be treatable if only there were clean water, fresh food, basic sanitation. But siege conditions allow for none of these. Bodies are burned at night or thrown over the walls because there's no space to bury them properly, and no one has the strength to dig graves anyway. The smell of death mingles with the smell of smoke and dust, creating an atmosphere that coats the throat, that seeps into clothing and hair, that becomes the city's new reality. Guillaume walks through Acre's quarters in the second week, witnessing the suffering. A mother approaches him, her face hollow with hunger, two skeletal children clinging to her skirts. She doesn't speak. She just extends her hand, begging. Guillaume gives her his own ration, a piece of hard biscuit, nothing more, and walks away before she can thank him. He can't bear her gratitude for something so inadequate. In the Mamluk camp, Sultan Khalil watches through the heat shimmer rising from the plain. He's 30 years old, methodical, patient in the way of men who understand that time is their ally. His father taught him that sieges are won not through glorious assaults, but through systematic application of pressure. Cut off supplies, destroy morale, wait for hunger and disease to do what swords cannot. Only then, when the enemy is weakened to breaking, deliver the final blow. He deliberately slows the bombardment after the first week, conserving ammunition. Why waste stones when starvation is doing the work? The occasional trebuchet shot, launched at unpredictable intervals, keeps the defenders from resting while using minimal resources. It's efficient, it's cruel, it's effective. Khalil sits in his red tent studying maps and reports. His commanders bring daily updates, stone counts, casualty estimates, intelligence from spies who've infiltrated the city. One emir suggests a direct assault on the walls, but Khalil dismisses the idea. The walls are damaged, but still formidable. A premature assault would cost thousands of lives for uncertain gain. Patience, he says, and his voice carries the certainty of a man fulfilling his father's dying wish. Let them weaken. Let them watch us eat while they starve. Let them pray for help that will never come. When their bodies are exhausted and their spirits are broken, then we attack. And when we attack, it will be overwhelming. From the Mamluk camp, where food is abundant and morale is high, the laughter of confident warriors carries on the wind. They can see the defenders on the walls, can watch them grow thinner, can observe the signs of a city dying. The laughter isn't cruel exactly. It's the sound of men who know they're winning, who believe God favors their cause, who see the end approaching and welcome it. Inside Acre, that laughter cuts deeper than any sword. On April 14th, during a brief lull in the bombardment, 300 Templars prepare for a night raid. The plan is desperate. Slip out through a sally port under cover of darkness, strike at Mamluk artillery positions, kill the crews, set fires, create chaos. They can't destroy the siege engines. There are too many and they're too well guarded. But they can kill men. They can prove they're still dangerous. They can, for one night, be hunters instead of prey. Guillaume leads the raid personally. At 60, he's twice the age of many knights, but he won't ask men to face what he won't face himself. Otto de Granson and Jean de Grailly, professional soldiers from England and France, join the Templars. They exit through a small hidden gate just after midnight, moving in silence across the open ground between the walls and the Mamluk camp. The moon provides just enough light to navigate. Too much light and they'll be spotted. Too little and they'll stumble. The balance is knife edge. They cross 200 yards of exposed ground, every step expecting the alarm to sound, arrows to fall, the raid to end before it begins. They reach the Mamluk lines undetected. For 20 minutes, it's perfect. Knights train their entire lives for this pour into the camp like a storm. Tents burn, soldiers scramble for weapons, the Templars fight with desperate ferocity, knowing this may be their last chance to strike back. Guillaume moves through the chaos with the economical violence of a master, each sword stroke precise and lethal. Decades of skill compress into moments of pure function. They reach the mining operations, sappers' tents and tunnel entrances, and throw torches into the passages. Men scream in the darkness below. The Templars press deeper into the camp, killing, burning, destroying. Then Mamluk cavalry arrives, summoned by war drums. The raiders find themselves suddenly fighting a defensive withdrawal, step by bloody step. The initial shock advantage is gone. Now it's skill against numbers, and numbers always win eventually. Guillaume orders the retreat. The Templars fight their way back toward the walls, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead. They make it to the Sally Port having lost 20 men but killed 10 times that number. Inside the walls, defenders cheer from the ramparts. For one night, they weren't victims. They were warriors. But Guillaume knows the truth as he removes his blood-soaked armor. They killed sappers, yes, but the tunnels remain intact. The timber supports still hold. They delayed nothing, changed nothing. The raid was theater, necessary for morale, but strategically meaningless. Still, that night, morale matters. The defenders sleep better than they have in weeks, believing they can still fight, still win. Guillaume lets them believe it. They'll learn the truth soon enough. In the tunnels beneath King Henry's tower, Hassan and his sappers resume their work the next morning. Hassan is 50 years old, from a Syrian family that's built and destroyed fortifications for 3 generations. His hands are scarred from decades of labor. His eyes have adjusted to darkness so completely that he sometimes squints in sunlight. He understands stone and earth the way Guillaume understands battlefields, instinctively, thoroughly, with respect for both their strength and their fragility. The tunnel angles upward toward the tower's foundation, shored up every few feet with timber supports. It's slow, dangerous work. Cave-ins are a constant risk. The air is stale, the space is claustrophobic. But Hassan and his men are professionals. They work in shifts around the clock, advancing a few feet each day. By May 8th, they've reached the foundation. Hassan runs his hands over the ancient stones, feeling for weaknesses, understanding the structure from underneath. He explains to his men what comes next. They'll expand the tunnel into a chamber, essentially creating an artificial cave beneath the tower. Massive timber pillars will hold up the ceiling temporarily. Then, when everything is ready, they'll coat the wood with oil and set it ablaze. The supports will burn through. The tower will collapse under its own weight. It's elegant, it's patient, it's certain. Above ground, Guillaume has noticed subtle signs, cracks appearing at the base of King Henry's tower, the structure settling slightly. He's seen this before in other sieges. They're mining underneath, but there's nothing he can do. Countermining would require men and resources they don't have. They can barely hold the walls. They certainly can't fight a war underground. He estimates they have a week, perhaps less. On May 4th, trumpets sound from the harbor. 40 ships bearing the royal standards of Cyprus appear on the horizon. King Henry II has arrived. The city erupts in celebration. Church bells ring across Acre. People line the harbor walls, cheering. The young king disembarks in full armor, projecting confidence he doesn't entirely feel. He brings 700 fresh troops, supplies, gold for mercenaries. It's not enough to change the siege's mathematics, but for exhausted defenders, it feels like salvation. Guillaume greets Henry formally at the harbor. The contrast between them is stark. The 60-year-old warrior weathered by 4 decades of warfare, the 20-year-old monarch trying to fill a crown too large for him. Guillaume bows with proper deference, but his eyes assess the young king with a grandfather's mix of affection and concern. "Your arrival brings hope, Your Majesty," Guillaume says, choosing his words carefully. Technically true. Hope and salvation are different things, but this isn't the moment to explain that. Henry's face glows with the excitement of youth about to prove itself. "We'll hold them, Grand Master. God and right are on our side." Guillaume doesn't contradict him. Not here, not now, not in front of the cheering crowds. Let them have this moment of joy. Reality will arrive soon enough. That evening, Henry convenes a war council in what remains of the royal quarters. Guillaume, Jean de Villiers, the Italian consuls, and various military commanders gather around a table scarred by trebuchet damage. Maps are spread, reports are reviewed. Henry listens to the assessments with growing horror. Guillaume speaks plainly. We can hold for weeks, perhaps a month, but unless a miracle arrives from Europe, unless the Pope calls a crusade and an army actually comes, we cannot win. We should negotiate terms while we still have leverage. The younger knights are outraged. Negotiate, surrender, they've just been reinforced, they have God on their side. Guillaume's pragmatism sounds like faithlessness. Henry is torn. Part of him recognizes Guillaume's wisdom. Part of him cannot bear to be the king who lost Jerusalem forever. He makes a decision that splits the difference. We'll hold. We'll send urgent messages to Europe telling them we need immediate help, but prepare for negotiations if no help comes. It's a compromise that satisfies no one but offends no one. Guillaume accepts it because at least Henry is thinking about evacuation rather than dying for empty symbolism. 3 days later, on May 7th, Henry sends emissaries to Khalil. They carry offers of tribute, trade concessions, recognition of Mamluk sovereignty. Just spare the city. Let them keep one port, one foothold. Khalil receives them in his red tent with cold courtesy. He listens to their proposals, his face revealing nothing. Then he asks a simple question. Have you brought me the keys of the city? The ambassadors admit they have no authority to surrender unconditionally. Khalil's response is measured but absolute. I made an oath to my father as he died. Acre will fall. Every Crusader fortress will be demolished. Tell your king to surrender unconditionally, and some may be ransomed. Resist further, and when my army enters, no quarter will be given. During this meeting, a stone from an Acre trebuchet crashes near Khalil's tent. Whether by accident or design, the Sultan will never know. But he draws his sword, nearly killing the messengers before his advisors restrain him. The moment of rage passes, but any possibility of negotiation dies with it. That same day, the Mamluks overrun King Hugh's tower, an outer defensive position. The Crusaders abandon it after brief futile resistance. Immediately, Mamluk engineers move in with measuring chains and tools. Guillaume watches from the inner walls and realizes exactly what's happening. They're not attacking to hold the position. They're using it as a staging point for the final mining operation. The real assault won't come over the walls. It will come from below. He turns to Jean de Villiers, who's joined him on the rampart. The hospitalaire's face shows he understands too. Can we countermine? Jean asks without hope. With what men? What resources? We can barely hold what we have. The two old warriors stand in silence, watching Mamluk engineers disappear into King Hugh's tower. The endgame is beginning. The ground beneath their feet has become an enemy they cannot fight. That night, Guillaume doesn't sleep. He walks the walls one final time, memorizing details he'll never see again. The angle of moonlight on the harbor, the sound of the sea against stone, the city spread below him, still alive despite everything, still home to thousands who believe these walls will protect them. The walls are already falling, they just don't know it yet. In 8 days, the sappers will light their fires. And when the flames consume the timber supports 20 feet below King Henry's tower, when the earth surrenders to gravity and 200 years of history collapses in a single night, the defenders will finally understand what Guillaume has known since Tripoli fell. Some endings cannot be prevented. They can only be faced with dignity. He touches the stone of the wall, feeling its solidity, knowing its fragility. Then, he descends the stairs to prepare his Templars for what's coming. Because even if the battle is lost, how they fight it still matters. Even if the walls must fall, they can choose to stand until the moment they do. May 15th, 1291. Deep beneath King Henry's tower, Hassan completes 8 days of work. The tunnel has become a chamber 30 feet across, its earthen ceiling held aloft by 20 massive timber pillars. Everything wooden has been coated with oil and pitch. Straw is piled around the base of each support. The mathematics are simple now. When these beams burn through, tons of stone above will surrender to gravity. The tower will collapse. The adjacent walls, which depend on the tower for structural integrity, will follow. Hassan briefs his men one final time. His voice is calm, professional. When we light this, you'll have 5 minutes before the heat becomes unbearable. 10 minutes before the collapse begins. Move quickly, move together. No one stays behind. The sappers nod. Some whisper prayers. They're about to bring down a fortress without catapults or battering rams, using nothing but fire and patience. It's the culmination of their craft, the proof of generational knowledge. Hassan feels pride despite the danger. This is what his family has done for 3 generations. This is his art. They light the torches, oil-soaked wood catches with a hungry sound, flames spreading across timber surfaces with terrifying speed. Within seconds, the chamber becomes an inferno. The men retreat through the tunnel, smoke chasing them, heat pressing at their backs like a physical force. Behind them, the supports begin to groan under the weight they're no longer strong enough to hold. Above ground, a Crusader sentinel named Peter stands watch on King Henry's tower. The night is quiet except for distant sounds from the Mamluk camp. He's exhausted. They're all exhausted. 6 weeks of siege has worn everyone to shadows of themselves. Peter leans against the parapet, fighting to keep his eyes open. Then he feels it. Oh, tremor, barely perceptible. He looks down at his feet. Dust rises between the stones, caught in torchlight. The trembling intensifies. The tower begins to groan, a deep sound from the earth itself, like the world is clearing its throat. "Something's wrong," Peter shouts. Other guards rush over. The groaning grows louder. Cracks race up the tower walls, visible even in darkness, spreading like lightning frozen in stone. Guillaume, on the tower of the legate 300 yards away, hears the sound and knows immediately what's happening. "Get off King Henry's tower," he bellows. "Everyone off, now." Some men obey instantly, running for the stairs. Others hesitate, not understanding the urgency. The hesitation costs them. The tower shudders violently. Stone grinds against stone. Then, with a roar that echoes across the entire city and can be heard in the Mamluk camp 2 kilometers distant, King Henry's tower collapses. 60 feet of fortification that has stood for generations falls into the defensive moat in a cascading avalanche of destruction. The sound is apocalyptic, endless. The adjacent wall sections, suddenly unsupported, crack and lean. Within minutes, they too collapse. A breach over 100 feet wide opens in Acre's defenses, a gap filled with rubble that slopes from the Mamluk camp directly into the city. Dust billows into the night sky, so thick it obscures the moon. When it begins to settle, there's simply a gap where the tower stood. A ramp of broken stone leading from outside to inside, from enemy territory to the heart of the city. From the Mamluk camp, the celebration begins immediately. Drums thunder. Cymbals clash. 45,000 warriors erupt in cheers, knowing the siege is essentially over. Some rush toward the breach, eager to attack immediately. But Khalil orders them back with sharp commands. He's methodical, even in victory. "The breach is there," he tells his commanders. "It will be there at dawn. Let the Crusaders panic through the night. Let them see our fires and know what's coming. At dawn, we'll prepare the rubble for assault, and when we attack, it will be overwhelming." Throughout the night, Mamluk engineers work on the breach, piling sand and earth onto the rubble to create a smooth pathway into the city. By false dawn, they've planted Khalil's red banner on top of the ruins, a flag visible from every point in Acre, announcing that the walls have fallen and the end has come. Inside the city, desperate councils convene. Can they defend the breach, build inner walls, evacuate? The options are all terrible. The breach is too wide to defend effectively. They lack men to hold both the breach and the remaining walls. Food will last perhaps 3 more days. No European reinforcements are coming. Guillaume's assessment is blunt. The breach is indefensible, too wide, too accessible. When they attack in force, we'll hold for hours, perhaps a day, that's all. Henry finally grasps the full horror. His arrival meant nothing. His reinforcements meant nothing. The walls he trusted to protect them have betrayed them in a single night. Then what do we do? Evacuate who we can. The military orders will hold the walls as long as possible to buy time for ships to leave. Your Majesty, you must board with the nobles. Cyprus needs you. The kingdom, even in exile, needs continuity. Henry wants to protest, to insist he'll die defending his kingdom, but Guillaume's logic is irrefutable. A dead king serves no one. A living king in exile can petition the Pope, rally Europe, keep the dream alive. Reluctantly, bitterly, Henry agrees. Throughout the night, defenders prepare for the final battle. Some write letters they know won't be delivered. Others make confession to priests who move through the ranks offering absolution. The Templars hold a last prayer service in their chapel, knowing many won't leave it alive. Guillaume walks among his knights, speaking quietly with each one, offering what comfort he can. He finds Brother Thomas kneeling before the altar. The young knight's lips move in silent prayer. Guillaume places a hand on his shoulder. Thomas looks up, face pale in candlelight. "I'm afraid, Grandmaster." "So am I," Guillaume says simply. "Fear is honest. It's what we do with it that matters. Will God remember us? Will anyone?" Guillaume considers this. God remembers everyone. As for men, that depends on who survives to tell the story. If you have the chance to leave, take it. Bear witness. Tell them we stood. That's all I ask. Thomas nods, understanding the burden being placed on him. If he survives, he'll carry not just his own story, but the stories of all who fall. Dawn comes red and terrible on May 18th, 1291. The defenders stand ready. They've fortified the breach as best they can, piling rubble and positioning crossbowmen. It's futile, and everyone knows it, but they do it anyway because action is better than waiting for death. Guillaume stands at the breach in full armor. Around him, 100 Templar knights, the finest warriors in Christendom, each worth 10 ordinary soldiers, prepare for their last stand. Jean de Villiers commands the Hospitallers further south along the wall. The regular defenders, militia and mercenaries, fill the gaps. As the sun breaches the horizon, the Mamluk camp erupts with sound. Drums boom, cymbals clash, trumpets blare, war cries in Arabic rise in waves. 45,000 warriors preparing for the final assault, their voices merging into a single roar. Guillaume addresses his Templars one final time. His voice is steady, carrying 40 years of accumulated authority. "We stand here at the end, but we stand. That will have to be enough. For God, for Jerusalem, for the brothers who came before us, we hold. We hold until we cannot, and then we meet our Creator, knowing we gave everything." The Templars thump their shields in response, not a cheer, not a shout, just the rhythmic thunder of warriors, accepting their fate. The sound carries a terrible dignity. Khalil gives the signal. The assault begins. Wave after wave of Mamluk warriors surge toward the breach, toward the walls, toward every gate and sally port. The bombardment intensifies, hundreds of stones per minute. Arrows darken the sky. Greek fire arcs toward the harbor, setting ships ablaze. At the breach, the Templars hold. Guillaume fights in the front rank, decades of skill evident in every movement. There's no wasted motion, no theatrical flourish. Just efficient, economical violence refined over 40 years. Mamluk warriors reaching the top of the rubble are cut down. Their bodies add to the obstacles, making the climb harder for those following. For a time, it seems possible they might hold. The Mamluks can't deploy their full numerical advantage through the narrow breach. It becomes a grinding attrition fight, and the Crusader elite warriors are, man for man, superior. But the Mamluks have numbers, and they have patience. They rotate fresh troops constantly. The Crusaders, already exhausted and starving, begin to tire. Mistakes happen. Gaps appear in the defensive line. Around the city, the Mamluks probe every defensive point. They scale walls with ladders. They batter gates with rams. They set fires near the harbor. It's coordinated, professional, relentless. The defenders are forced to split their attention, to send reinforcements everywhere, to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. By mid-morning, the Mamluks capture the accursed tower on the inner wall. It's a critical position. The Crusader defensive line begins to fragment. What was organized resistance becomes pockets of desperate men fighting in isolation. Guillaume realizes the end is near. He sends runners to other positions with orders to fall back toward the harbor, to buy time for evacuation, to make every minute count. Then, he leads a counterattack to retake the accursed tower, knowing it's futile but necessary. Someone has to hold the line while others escape. The counterattack pushes forward through narrow streets choked with rubble and bodies. Guillaume fights at the front, his sword rising and falling with the rhythm of decades. Then, while driving back a group of Mamluk soldiers, he drops his sword. His knights cry out, thinking he's retreating. He turns, raises his arm, shows them the arrow lodged under his armpit where his armor has a gap. The shaft has penetrated deep. Blood soaks his white surcoat, spreading across the red cross. Je ne m'enfuis pas, he says clearly. Je suis mort. Voici le coup. I'm not running away. I am dead. Here is the blow. His knights try to carry him to safety, but Guillaume refuses. He walks, steady despite the wound, back toward the Templar fortress. Each step is deliberate, chosen. He makes it perhaps 200 yards before his legs give way. He collapses in a narrow street surrounded by the sounds of a dying city. Brother Thomas finds him there, cradled by two other Templars. Guillaume's breathing is shallow, labored. Blood pools beneath him, but his eyes are clear, focused. He gestures Thomas closer. Get to the ships, Guillaume whispers. Tell them we stood, that's all. Tell them we stood. Thomas nods, tears streaming down his face. He wants to stay, to die beside his mentor. But Guillaume's final order is absolute. Bear witness, survive to tell the story. Guillaume de Beaujeu, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, dies in that narrow street as his city falls around him. He's 60 years old. He's been preparing for this moment his entire adult life. At the end, there's no fear in his face, no regret. Just the calm of a man who kept his oaths to the last breath. The defense collapses. The Mamluks pour through the breach, through breached walls, through captured gates. The city becomes a battlefield of house-to-house fighting. Civilians caught in combat zones are cut down, buildings burn. The retreat toward the harbor becomes a rout. Thousands try to reach the ships. The docks are pandemonium. People fight each other for space on overcrowded vessels. Ships sink from too many refugees. Swimmers are struck by arrows. The water near shore turns red. Henry's ship, one of the last to leave, is so overloaded it nearly capsizes. The young king stands on deck, watching Acre burn, smoke rising from the city he was crowned to rule. His crown remains intact, but his kingdom is gone. He's 21 years old and has just learned that some endings cannot be prevented by courage or faith or royal blood. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, Nicholas of Hanapes, insists on evacuating as many refugees as his ship can hold. He's warned the vessel is dangerously overloaded. He orders more taken aboard anyway. The ship makes it perhaps 100 yards from shore before water rushes over the gunwales. The Patriarch and hundreds of refugees drown in sight of the city they're trying to escape. Jean de Villiers, wounded but alive, leads the surviving hospitalers in a fighting withdrawal. They reach the harbor and escape by ship. His face, as he watches Acre recede, is haunted by survivors' guilt and relief mixed in equal measure. By afternoon, the Mamluks control everything except the Templar fortress. The massive fortified compound in the southwestern corner of the city was designed to be defended even if the city fell. The surviving Templars retreat there, perhaps 200 men, along with whoever can reach them. Khalil sends messengers offering terms. Surrender, and you'll be granted safe passage to Cyprus. Peter of Sèvres, the acting commander after Guillaume's death, initially agrees. A truce is called. Mamluk soldiers are allowed into the fortress to supervise the evacuation. But some of these soldiers, undisciplined or cruel, begin assaulting women and children among the refugee population. The violation of the truce is immediate and grotesque. The Templars react with fury. They kill the Mamluk soldiers inside the fortress, throw the bodies over the walls, and prepare for a siege within a siege. Peter goes to Khalil's camp under flag of truce to explain that his men acted to protect refugees from assault, not to break the agreement deliberately. Khalil, enraged at the killing of his soldiers, has Peter beheaded on the spot. The truce is finished. The Mamluks resume bombardment, now focused solely on the Templar fortress. For 10 days, the compound holds. Every assault is repulsed. The Templars fight with the desperation of men who know surrender is no longer possible. They're outnumbered, surrounded, starving. But they hold. Khalil orders his sappers to repeat their work. Mine underneath the fortress, collapse it the same way King Henry's tower fell. It's methodical, patient, certain. On May 28th, the sappers complete their tunnels. Fire is lit beneath the main tower. The surviving Templars hear the ominous creaking and know exactly what's happening. They don't retreat because there's nowhere to retreat to. They stand in the tower, weapons in hand, as the ground begins to shake. The collapse is catastrophic. The tower doesn't just fall, it implodes, pancaking down on itself. Everyone inside is killed instantly, crushed by the very stones they defended. But the collapse doesn't stop there. The undermining was so extensive that the entire fortress wall adjoining the tower also comes down. Mamluk soldiers who rushed forward to enter the breached fortress are caught in the collapse. The rubble buries attackers and defenders together. When the dust settles, the Templar fortress is rubble. The last organized Crusader resistance in the Holy Land is finished. 200 years after the First Crusade captured Jerusalem, the Christian kingdoms cease to exist. Khalil surveys the destruction from a distance. His victory is complete, but it's sobering. The Crusaders, outnumbered, starving, doomed from the start, fought to the absolute last breath. Half of his casualties in the entire siege happened in that single moment of collapse. He orders the systematic demolition of everything remaining, every fortification destroyed, every tower leveled, every wall pulled down. He wants to ensure the Crusaders can never return, never rebuild, never use this as a foothold again. Within days, his armies capture the remaining Crusader footholds along the coast. Tyre, Sidon, Beirut, Haifa fall without significant resistance. By summer's end, not a single Christian-held fortress remains on the Levantine coast, except the Templar castle at Tortosa, which is voluntarily abandoned in August. Khalil enters Damascus in triumph, but rather than a bloodthirsty celebration, the procession is remarkably restrained. There are chained Crusader prisoners, yes. Captured banners carried upside down, yes. But Khalil also releases many prisoners, showing mercy to those who surrendered peacefully. Muslim chroniclers describe the celebration, but also note the Sultan's reflection. We have liberated land held by foreigners for 200 years, but what did it cost? What have we become in this endless war? In Cyprus, the survivors arrive in waves. Henry establishes a government in exile, continuing to claim the title King of Jerusalem, though Jerusalem is hundreds of miles away and firmly in Muslim hands. But something remarkable happens. The survivors don't give up. They rebuild. Cyprus becomes the new center of Christian activity in the East. Plans for new crusades begin immediately, though they never materialize in meaningful form. Brother Thomas, who survived by being on an evacuation ship, begins telling Guillaume's story. He speaks to nobles in France, to clergy in Rome, to anyone who will listen. His voice cracks when he describes the Grand Master's final words. Je ne m'enfuis pas, je suis mort. One noble asks, then they died for nothing? Thomas considers this carefully. No, my lord, they died so that others could live. Every hour they held the walls, more ships escaped. Thousands of people are alive today because of Guillaume's last stand. He knew he couldn't win. He just wanted to make the losing matter. This becomes the narrative that persists across Europe. Not a glorious victory, but meaningful sacrifice. Not conquest, but courage. Guillaume and his Templars lost, but their sacrifice bought time for thousands to escape. They couldn't save the kingdom, but they saved the people in it. The Templar order itself becomes a casualty of Acre's fall. Without a holy land to defend, without a clear mission, the Templars lose their purpose. Their wealth makes them targets. Within 16 years, King Philip IV of France destroys the order through arrests, torture, and executions. But Guillaume's personal legacy endures. He's remembered not as a successful general, but as a faithful knight who kept his oaths to the end. News of Acre's fall spreads across Europe like wildfire. Pope Nicholas IV calls for a new crusade, but the response is tepid. England is embroiled in conflicts with Scotland. France deals with internal issues. The Holy Roman Empire is fragmented. The age of crusading fervor has passed. People are shocked by Acre's fall, but not shocked enough to do anything about it. Yet, the stories persist. Guillaume's last stand, the Templars' 10-day holdout, Henry's desperate evacuation. These stories spread through Europe, becoming legends even as they're still fresh history. They're told and retold, embellished and preserved, passed down through generations. In 1293, just 2 years after his triumph, Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil is assassinated by his own commanders during a hunting expedition. The man who completed his father's mission, who drove the Crusaders from the Holy Land, dies at the hands of men he trusted. His reign lasts less than 3 years. Nothing lasts forever. Not Crusader kingdoms, not Mamluk sultanates, not empires or armies or the men who lead them. The Kingdom of Jerusalem survives as a government in exile on Cyprus. Henry lives until 1324, never abandoning his claim to Jerusalem. His successors continue the tradition for centuries. The dream doesn't die just because the territory is lost. Sometimes the symbol matters more than the substance. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire conquers the Mamluk Sultanate. The very empire that celebrated Acre's fall is itself absorbed by a larger power. The territories Khalil liberated in 1291 change hands again. History continues its endless churn, empires rising and falling, borders shifting, peoples conquering and being conquered in turn. Today, Acre is a city in Israel, designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tourists walk the same ground where Templars died. The ruins of Crusader fortifications are preserved as historical monuments. Muslim, Jewish, and Christian communities coexist in spaces that once knew only conflict. Archaeological excavations continue uncovering layers of history, each telling a story, none lasting forever. On May 18, 1291, Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil's army laughed as they watched the walls of Acre fall in a single night. The starving Crusaders, who fought with such courage for so long, were swept away in hours. It seemed like an ending. But endings are illusions. The stones fell, but the stories remained. Guillaume de Beaujeu's courage echoes across 8 centuries. The refugees who escaped to Cyprus built new lives, new communities. The dream of Jerusalem, while never reclaimed, never quite died either. Khalil thought he'd ended the Crusades. In a sense, he did. But he also demonstrated something older than Crusades, something that transcends any single battle or kingdom. You can conquer territory, but you can't conquer memory. You can break walls, but you can't break the human capacity for hope. The Crusader kingdoms fell, but the people who'd lived in them fought for them, fled from them. They persisted, they adapted, they survived. History doesn't end. It transforms. The walls of Acre fell in 1291, but the stories of those walls, of the people who defended them, the people who broke them, the dreams and fears on both sides, those stand forever. What remained after the dust settled wasn't the kingdom. It was the courage to face the end with dignity, the willingness to hold the walls just one more hour so that others might escape, the understanding that some things matter more than victory. Guillaume de Beaujeu couldn't save Acre, but he could choose how Acre was lost. And in that choice, in that final stand, those final words spoken with an arrow already in his heart, he gave meaning to defeat. That's what remained. That's what remains still.